The woman on the raised dais jabbed a finger at Elena Pierce and said, "You owe everyone an explanation." The accusation landed like a slap in front of 300 guests and a bank of cameras. Elena felt a hot, immediate shame and measured the sound of her own breath against the chandeliers while people leaned forward to watch. Shame pushed her toward the nearest exit, towards any way out of being seen that way. Someone moved into the space between Elena and the dais. "Gabriel Hart, she doesn't owe you anything." His voice carried across the gala floor. Elena heard the edge in his baritone before she could see the man well enough to remember his face. The host, Julian Mercer, blinked as the room shifted to watch a new story taking shape. Elena kept one hand on her clutch, fingers flat on the leather, as if that pressure could stop her knees from folding. She knew the risk. Accusations at charity events become headlines by morning. She also knew the cost of letting the room decide her truth. Her social balance hung on small choices. Tonight, that balance had snapped. Gabriel's presence was measured, a controlled stop between a predator and his prey. He raised his chin and offered a small, strategic smile that told the room he belonged here and that this woman was with him. Elena felt an urge to pull away and an equal urge to let him wrap her in the illusion. That tension, shame bending toward avoidance, and a raw need to be defended became the engine of her next move. Julian clapped, pretending to laugh to control the cameras. Sophie Lane, who had started the scene, pushed forward with a glass in her hand and a smile sharpened for spectacle. "Such a relief to know you're taken care of, Sophie," loud enough for several phones. The crowd reacted like a trained audience. Elena's pulse moved in the hollows at her throat. Gabriel put a hand near Elena's elbow in a way that was not touching but not absent. "Elena, may I escort you to the balcony? We can talk where the cameras can't follow." There was an implicit offer to remove the current humiliation. Elena heard the possibility before she trusted it. Outside, the balcony smelled of hot pavement and cigarette smoke from lower floors, neon slashes reflected on glass. Gabriel closed the door behind them and turned the confrontation into a private problem. We step outside, we make a scene a memory. We act like a couple for the night. Cameras and rumor move on when a story is tidy." Elena looked at him and said, "You propose marriage at a charity gala." Her voice did not sound like a joke. She was 30, used to polite cruelty at other people's benefit dinners, and practiced at smoothing incidents so they didn't become scandals. That practice had cost her late nights and hollow apologies, and it had taught her how to hold her face still while panic pressed behind her ribs. Tonight, shame was not only a feeling. It was a practical problem with consequences for her family name and a rumored debt Sophie was trying to exploit. Gabriel's eyes tightened. Not marriage, a convincing enough demonstration. "We'll sign nothing. We stop Julian from staging a spectacle. We get you out of being the target." He named the stakes aloud. Elena understood immediately that the risk was not only to her dignity but to her privacy. Pictures, whispers, a possible hint at an earlier private mistake Sophie wanted to weaponize. She hesitated. She watched the reflection of neon on the balcony glass, where the city blurred into streaks. She thought of a ledger she had refused to let anyone open that contained a single misstep, an unpaid guarantee arranged years ago by a relative. If Sophie teased that out, it would become story and leverage. The shame tightened again, then shifted to anger. "You can just decide for me, Elena." Her hands made a small, sharp gesture. "Why would I trust someone I met tonight?" The anger in her voice changed the air between them. Gabriel's steady mask showed no answer. His jaw flexed once. "Gabriel, because I prefer the eyes in the room to watch a confident couple rather than a collapsing target. Because a scandal takes two people to sell. Because I don't like spectators becoming executioners." His words were spare. Elena felt curiosity wedge into her anger, a new emotion that made her study his face for a crack. They returned to the suite where staff kept doors half closed and the city hummed under glass. Gabriel laid out terms in short sentences. No names, no ownership, public proof of a relationship for tonight only, a set of gestures and one staged kiss if necessary. Elena read each term as if it were a contract, though no ink changed hands. She wanted to refuse, to walk to the elevator and leave the gala to its predators. Her own voice betrayed the calculation. If I agree, Elena, what stops you from walking away when the crowd stops looking? She kept her voice steady. What guarantee do I have that you won't sell this to someone else or deny it tomorrow? Gabriel paused, a sleeve adjustment, a precise movement. I don't sell stories, he said. I avoid them. I keep reputations safe when it's useful to me. That answer uncovered another layer. He valued control and reputation more than profit in this moment. Elena felt a shift from suspicion to wary negotiation. They practiced on the balcony doorway. Elena put her hand at the small of Gabriel's back the way a couple might at a private party. She kept the touch deliberate and mechanical. Gabriel breathed a fraction slower and answered in the same measured way. Their rehearsal was interrupted by a push at the door. Sophie had not given up. Sophie stepped forward with security rammers at her elbow, and a photo pulled from a phone. Make it real, Sophie, or I make this worse. She handed the photo up for display. It was a close, unflattering shot from a different party, Elena laughing with a man who wasn't her fianc. Julian leaned in, savoring the potential discord. Elena's mouth went dry. An external threat had advanced the plot again. Gabriel put himself between Sophie and Elena and moved with a single physical sentence. He took the phone and crushed the angle with his hand so cameras could not steal the image cleanly. Enough, Gabriel. This ends now. He did not shout. He made the room follow the cadence of his control. A roaming photographer stepped closer, camera raised. Elena felt herself drawn into performance. She let a small laugh out that sounded rehearsed and tightly produced. Gabriel, stop stealing my thunder. She used his name to anchor the pretend moment. He named her back in a softer register. Elena, don't let them do this to you. The name exchange tightened the act into a public story. The staged kiss came because Sophie demanded spectacle, and the crowd obliged. Their lips met near a doorway as a dozen people cleared space. Elena expected the ritual to be empty. She expected to feel only the mechanics of a lie. Instead, something in the contact altered the angle of her awareness. She felt the press of his hand against her waist, the dry warmth of his mouth, and the peculiar focused hush that happens when two people stop watching the room and register one another. The photographer's shutter clicked. The photo that framed them in embrace had the wrong angle for Sophie. Instead of humiliation, it hinted at intimacy. Sophie glared at the camera as if it had betrayed her. Julian's amusement tightened into surprise. The room took a new breath. That single image became a pivot. The pretense had split and produced a truth neither of them expected. Back in the suite, Julian, or someone in his circle, sent a short, cold message that read like leverage. There are other images. Elena read the words under the study lamp and felt a fresh lurch of fear. What had begun as a fight for dignity had become a defensive scramble against blackmail. She looked at Gabriel for the first time, not only as an accomplice, but as a possible shield. Gabriel read the message and set the phone on the table. We stop this in public, he said. We either make the rumor die tonight or we expose who profits from it. Elena noticed how his jaw tightened and how his left hand moved to a minimal signet ring, a tiny ritual of thought. The shame shifted into resolve. She braced herself to act. They moved to the suite's entertainment room when Julian signaled for an announcement. Guests gathered, curiosity armed like knives. Sophie found a new stage in the room's speakers and smiled like someone who had rehearsed a morning headline. Friends, she announced, we all deserve the truth. The room bent forward. This was the climax in waiting. Gabriel stepped forward into the center of the gathered crowd. He did not wait for the scripted reveal. No one here gets to choose shame for someone else. His voice had length, a deliberate weight that made heads turn. Julian flushed and tried to interject. Gabriel, that's theatrics. Julian, Gabriel, bring me the files. Let everyone see what you sell for a headline. He named the action. That demand turned the staged humiliation into a public test. The crowd made a small sound like brittle glass shifting. People sensed there would be fallout. Sophie stood frozen for the first time that night. "You can see," she began. Security Ramos's shoulders tightened and several phones angled to record. Elena felt a tremor run through the floorboards into her feet. The fear, sharp and immediate, returned, then split into something else. Gratitude that someone had stood up and risked a small war on her behalf. Julian hesitated too long. Gabriel moved as if he already had Julian's files in his hand. He named a concrete accusation against Julian, pointed to emails, and laid out a short list of who had profited from manufactured scandals. He did not speak in metaphors. He read lines of messages and a transfer record. The guests fell into a silence that had the texture of people waiting to be told how to react. Sophie blurted, "That's not proof." She fought to keep the script. Gabriel answered with 3 short lines, "Search your phone. Ask security Ramos about the receipts." Julian, open the drawer. His commands forced small actions from others. This quick, public takedown changed the night into a contest of evidence and courage. Someone pulled up a thread on a tablet and showed receipts. Security Ramos folded a stack of printed emails and handed them to a guest who read aloud. The crowd moved from spectacle to fact, checking. Elena watched Sophie lose composure. "Elena, Sophie, stop." Her voice came out low but planted. "Sophie, you wanted to make me small. Now decide what you want to be." Sophie spat. "You will pay for this." The threat hung like a promise. Gabriel looked at Elena and then at Sophie. "If you threaten her again, I will name you in every place that will listen, Gabriel." His pacing was calm. Elena felt safety mix with the new pressure. Protection that required public escalation. After the confrontation, guests dispersed in awkward clumps. Julian's charade unraveled faster than anyone expected. Elena and Gabriel moved back toward the balcony, where rain had started to thread down the glass, marking streaks of neon. Outside, the city sounded like a distant machine. They sat on a narrow bench and counted the stakes aloud. "Elena, they will try something else. They want to stop at a photograph." She squeezed her clutch. He listened, then said, "Then we plan for that. We keep this to tonight unless they escalate." The conversation moved from immediate rescue into strategy, and both shifted into quieter, more private registers. "Elena, why do this for me?" She named the question like a contract clause. Gabriel set his jaw, then gave a small, precise answer. "Because I decided not to watch an unjust spectacle. Because I prefer to control the narrative rather than be controlled by it." His candor did not explain his motives fully, but it did change the emotional balance. They made a list of small moves: who to contact, which images to bury, what to tell staff. Each decision was concrete. Elena watched him as he moved through the tasks, phone calls, short instructions to security, a quiet conversation with the suite manager. He knew how to make systems work and how to guide people into doing what he needed without theatrics. When the immediate danger faded, the night's pretense remained. The promises they made to one another, for privacy, for plausible optics, felt thicker now, not just practical but charged. Elena felt her guard shift again from wary to curious, and then to a careful warmth when he offered a thin gold chain he noticed she carried, and tucked it into her bag like an afterthought of protection. As Gabriel walked Elena to the bedroom doorway, his hand brushed against the small of her back with a motion that felt deliberate and slow. Elena did not step away. "Will you be safe tomorrow?" she asked, naming the next night's fear. Gabriel paused and answered with a small, surprising intimacy. "I will be here for the morning express if they need someone." His promise was concrete, an action he could perform. Elena folded that into her calculation, and almost as a test, she touched the corner of his cufflink with 2 fingers. He left a single object as a sign of intent. A sleek leather card holder that had a small embossed initial and a business card tucked inside with his name and a short line, If trouble returns, call me. The card was neither a vow nor a flourish. It was a functional tool that mattered in the ledger of decisions. Elena watched him go down the suite hallway toward the elevator. Rain slid past the glass and sheeted the neon into lines. She closed the bedroom door behind her and set the card holder on the bedside table. She arranged the little things on the table, clutch, shawl, ring, like small proofs that she had not collapsed under the night's pressure. The shame that had begun the evening had shifted through anger, then suspicion, then into a guarded relief and something like interest. She lay awake long enough to list the possibilities. Sophie could sue for attention. Julian could leak historic items. Someone could try to sell the photograph set. She thought of Gabriel's name, his exact timing, and the way his hand had steadied her on the balcony. She made a decision to keep the card but not to call unless she needed to. A knock sounded at the suite door just after midnight. Elena sat upright. Her pulse quickened into apprehension. The final beat, an action that would decide the chapter's immediate resolution, arrived as a measured line on the door. She opened it to find Gabriel in the doorway, rain on his shoulders, hair flattened at the temple scar. He held the elevator gate open with one hand, and with the other pressed a small, silent look to her. "I promised I'd be here for the morning's mess," he said. "Consider this the night guard." Elena let him in. She closed the door with a hand that did not tremble. The night's bargain was not over, but a small, concrete promise had been made and physically placed on her table. She slid the card into her clutch and, with that single motion, sealed the pact for now. Elena shoved past a clump of photographers, the press strobe slashing at her shoulder, and a woman in a sequined dress barked, "You owe everyone an explanation." Gabriel closed the suite door behind her with a single, deliberate motion that cut the cameras to muffled clicks and distant shouting. Shame lodged at Elena's throat the way a tight collar does. She had felt it earlier on the raised dais, when someone jabbed a finger and demanded answers in front of cameras. That shame pushed her forward now, toward the empty living room. Toward a man she barely knew, but whose hand had blocked the hallway for a moment long enough to buy her a choice. Elena's breath made small clouds in the cold pocket of air between the door and the living room. She dropped her clutch onto the glass table and kept her heels on, because guests still stood on the other side of that thin barrier of wood and hinges. "Who are you?" she asked, more sharp than she wanted. "Gabriel Hart," he said, his voice low and even. The name landed like a fact, exactly measured. "Stay with me for an hour," he added, not asking but offering a strategy. The proposition made her chest ache with a second emotion, suspicion, because the embossed invitation she had just seen, minutes earlier in a display case, had linked Gabriel to Veronica Hale, the woman who had humiliated her in front of 300 people. Marco Reyes pushed against the glass with the security team, shouting at a photographer to back off. In the living room, Elena turned and saw Marco's head in the doorway. His jaw tight, his face asking a question he wouldn't voice. "Elena, Marco, they want to leave. They'll swarm in." Elena cut him off with a look. "Let me think," she said, and the words were steady but raw. Shame bent into anger then. Elena's shoulders squared. She would not let the hall full of lenses decide what she would say about her life. Gabriel stepped closer and laid a palm on the small of the door to muffle the sound spilling into the suite. He did not touch Elena. He watched her, cataloguing the angle of her jaw, the way her fingers curled on the clutch. "We pretend," he said, for the cameras. "We leave together. 10 minutes of show, then we split. You get an exit. I get nothing on my name." His voice held an evenness that wanted to be accepted on principle. Elena felt the suspicion slide a fraction into calculation. The plan was simple, crude, and fast. "You want me to kiss you?" she said, and her tone stripped the absurdity down to the one transactional act that would quiet the outside. They rehearsed a two-line lie in front of the mirrored wall. Gabriel murmured, "Elena and I are seeing each other," And she answered, "Yes, it's complicated." The mirrored wall doubled their practiced smiles. The reflection made both of them look straighter, more composed. Lena Kruz's camera phone pinged with a live image from the corridor. Alina watched the notification glow on a side table and felt a new fear that something she couldn't control would go online. "Marco, get that phone." "Tell her to stop," Alina ordered, and Marco moved, fumbling with accusations and promises to the press. A flash of real anger cut through her rehearsed calm. She had not asked to be exposed. She had not wanted a finger jabbed at her face under chandeliers. Lena kept circling outside, kneeling like a predator for the right angle. From the suit study, Alina felt the tiny vibration of another message arrive. She opened it with a thumb that trembled. The screen showed Julian Pierce's name and a photograph. Elena on the dais, and behind her, a folded hand that seemed to orchestrate the moment. The message read, "You should have left it alone." Alina's breath shortened and the word betrayal sharpened everything around her. Betrayal traveled through the room like a current. It made Gabriel's hand go still at his side and made Marco step closer to her, as if to offer both protection and accusation. Julian sent that. Gabriel, keeping his voice flat so it wouldn't carry. Elena nodded and handed him the phone. He scrolled once, twice, and the muscle along his jaw tightened. Julian Pierce, Gabriel, naming the man as if putting a weight down on the table. "He's not helping you." The sentence changed the evening's math. Where Alina had thought the danger came from a hostile stranger, the danger reconfigured itself inward. Someone in her circle had pushed her into this spectacle. The suspicion hardened into purpose. Alina would survive this night without conceding more of herself. They moved to the balcony because Marco insisted, because a staged kiss on a neon-lit edge would make the tabloids hungry and leave fewer questions. Veronica Hale appeared at the suite door like a storm front, white fur, a smile that split her face and didn't reach her eyes. And she shouted a demand for explanation that carried through the sliding glass. Gabriel stepped between Alina and Veronica, his body turning like a shield. "Elena and I are together tonight," he said to the cameras. And his voice cut through Lena's lens and the buzzing reporters. The crowd shifted. The threshold that had felt like a blade softened. Elena felt a new emotion unspool beneath the others, relief that the immediate danger could be managed. On the balcony, neon signs painted their faces in teal and gold. Alina's silk dress clung damply at her collarbone. The air smelled of exhaust and jasmine. Gabriel cupped her face once, brief and businesslike, and their lips met because that is what the cameras wanted. A kiss to sell the story. The kiss was short, rehearsed, a press release made flesh. Yet when Gabriel's cheek grazed hers afterward, Alina noticed a scar along his hairline and the way his hand trembled for a sliver of a beat. The rehearse turned to something else in a blink, an ember of something like curiosity, and Alina felt the floor beneath her composure tilt. A new emotion rose up. Wary curiosity. She kept her knees rigid, keeping the performance straight. The photographers retreated, satisfied by the image. Marco opened the door and motioned for security to clear a path. Veronica's glare followed Alina into the suit like steam. Inside the living room the lights were dim, and the mirrored corridor multiplied the night's images. Elena walked toward the study where she had earlier found an embossed invitation in Gabriel's jacket, a small slip of cream paper with a monogram linking him to Veronica. She put her palm flat on the desk and felt the wood's cool finish. Her hands were steady, but her throat hummed with questions. "Why are you connected to Veronica?" she asked, and the question was a probe, a demand for a fact that would make the evening honest. Gabriel perched on the edge of a leather chair, one cufflink catching a sliver of light. "Veronica and I have business overlap," he said. "We have met at certain charity events. That doesn't make her my partner in anything dirty." Elena, his voice was precise. It wanted to be believed. Elena felt an internal swing from suspicion back toward anger. If he was entangled with Veronica, his presence might be a setup. If this is a setup, she said. I'm going to ruin whoever planned it. The sentence landed with a promise edged in cold. Gabriel's eyes softened for an instant. You read dangerous when you decide to fight back, he said, and the line was almost a compliment. A message lit Elena's phone again. It was a photo from an unknown number. A candid shot of Elena walking from the dais earlier, but someone had placed a folded playing card in her hand in the picture, an obvious prop, staged. The new image pushed her from anger into fear. The fear was a practical thing. What would be done to her reputation next? What evidence could be planted? She paced once, then stopped and set both palms on the dressing table, feeling the weight of the room. Marco watched her with an expression that was both protective and helpless. Who sent that? Marco demanded, voice low, I don't know, Elena, but it came from inside. The revelation changed the geometry of trust in the room. At the center of the suit, Lena's latest uploads began to flood the lobby live feeds again. The building's security guard called for calm. Someone mentioned legal teams. Gabriel moved to the window and looked down at the strip, where Neon argued with Night. We need to control the narrative for 10 minutes. After that, we separate. You go home, I drive you to a car. No one follows. The plan was specific. Elena listened and felt a small, unexpected steadiness re-anchor her. The shame that had driven her into the suit had turned into a pragmatic, stripping focus. Survive, protect, expose whoever kept setting traps. The confrontation on the balcony was staged but edged with raw feelings. Veronica pressed forward and called Elena a liar in a voice that sprayed the air like ice. Veronica's accusation was answered by a chorus of camera shouts. Elena held her chin up. Veronica, she said, using the name because naming is a way to hold someone accountable. What were you doing in my meeting last week? Veronica's smile thinned, as if it matters, she said. Your life is spectacle now. The exchange produced a flurry of camera angles and a rising chorus of commentary from the press. Elena's anger shifted into resolve. She would not give Veronica the satisfaction of a breakdown. Then something happened that no rehearsal accounted for. A live feed froze and then a new image appeared. In Gabriel's jacket pocket, under the invitation, there was a second card, an embossed dice graphic and a clipped edge of a business card with a name that made Elena's mouth go dry. She recognized it, Julian Pierce. The discovery felt like a knife turning. It was a twist that reconfigured motives. Elena stared at Gabriel. Is Julian in this? She asked, one sentence blunt. Gabriel's face closed. I don't know his intent. But yes, his card was in my pocket. I found it tonight when I put my jacket on. The admission changed the balance. The suspicion that had been on Veronica's shoulders splintered. Now the danger moved through names she trusted. Gabriel's voice tightened. We can still do the plan. We can let the cameras believe the kiss, and the story will die in 12 hours because no one wants an ongoing scandal right now. Elena breathed, and a new emotion threaded through, tentative gratitude, because he had not lied when he offered cover. But the gratitude sat beside doubt. A small voice at the back of her mind asked why Gabriel had a card connecting him to a man whose motives were unclear. Why would Julian leave his mark in your pocket? Elena, and her question demanded a choice from Gabriel. Explain, deny, or lie. Gabriel the truth as he knew it. I done let people plant things on me. If his card was there, it was put there earlier at a charity dinner I attended. I didn't read it then because I didn't expect it to matter. His hands made small, careful gestures. The explanation did not close the night, but it kept the situation from exploding. Elena felt the emotion shift again, from fear back toward a cautious trust. She allowed herself to plan the exit. Marco would escort her, Lena would get one last shot, and Veronica would sulk in public triumph while privately losing control. The plan sounded tidy because they needed tidy. They stepped onto the balcony one more time for the final image. Gabriel held Elena's elbow, his fingers light but possessive. The cameras loved possession. Veronica stalked them with a host of accusations on her tongue. Marco and security made a corridor through the crowd. When Gabriel kissed Elena again, this time he hesitated at the edge, longer than necessary, and his breath ghosted across her cheek. Elena felt that hesitation as if it were an electric sting. She pulled back and looked at him. "Why did you hesitate?" she asked. The question broke the practiced calm and made the moment private in a public place. Gabriel's eyes met hers with an answer that had no words. It was real enough to make me pause. Back in the suite, the cameras finally withdrew. The lobby quieted. Elena and Gabriel retreated to the bedroom that had been set up for overnight guests, a place with low light and a sliding door. Their performance fell away with the applause. They sat on the edge of the bed opposite one another, both still in their evening clothes. Elena unwrapped a folded paper from the dressing table and found two small objects left deliberately. A pair of dice and a faded business card with a clipped corner. The dice were not random. Someone was playing a game. The card had no name she could read in the dim. She felt the night's calculation firm like a net around her. Gabriel reached out and touched the dice, as if testing them, rolling them between his fingers once and setting them down. "Someone's making sure we know this isn't over," he said. Elena nodded and felt a last small surge of anger, this time a controlled, workable anger. "Then we done play by their rules," she said. The words were not a vow or a speech. They were a tactical decision. Gabriel's thumb brushed the small scar at his temple and he looked at her. "Tonight, we walked a tightrope and we didn't fall. But they left a sign. That means they want a reaction." His sentence created the chapter's next problem. Who wanted the reaction and why? Elena moved to the nightstand and set the dice beside her phone. The device still held messages and images, a small archive of breaches. She locked the screen and then unlocked it again as if more proof might appear. The room smelled faintly of jasmine and cedar from Gabriel's coat. Their voices were low and practical now. "Do you intend to help me find who did this?" "Elena, I said I'd help you get out of the hall. Now I should ask for something in return." Gabriel looked at her, and for the first time his voice broke a shapeless reserve. "I'll help," he said. "But you need to decide if you want a protector or an ally." Elena met his eyes and counted emotion, instead of making a choice right away. She had learned that tonight, quicker decisions could make problems worse. She thought of Julian's card, Veronica's glare, Lena's persistent camera, Marco's helpful presence. She listed them aloud in short sentences, because making a plan required names. "Julian," she said. "Veronica." She paused. "Lena." Each name set an axis. Gabriel suggested a next move. Marco would drive her to a friend's residence 2 blocks off the strip. Gabriel would call a legal contact and see what could be traced back to Julian. Elena agreed to the split itinerary and to one more thing. She asked Gabriel to keep the dice. "You keep the dice," she said, and Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "What if it's bait and they want to watch us react?" "Then I will be the one watched," he said, and the sentence was not boastful. It was a chosen risk. They left the dice on the nightstand, but Gabriel slipped the clipped business card into his pocket after checking its edge under a lamp. The gesture felt like possession of the problem. Elena stood, smoothing her dress with both hands. The night's performance had won them a temporary reprieve, but the gauntlet had been thrown. The final sound before they left the bedroom was a faint knock at the suite door, 3 short raps that made Elena freeze. Gabriel's eyes sharpened. He went to the door and peered through the peephole. There was no one visible in the corridor. He opened the door a crack and found a small velvet pillow placed exactly under the handle with a single pair of dice and a clipped business card resting on it. A new emotion cut through Elena then, unease that was sharper than fear and more actionable. Someone had placed the token directly outside the suite after they had been inside. That meant they were being watched up close. Gabriel picked up the pillow, the dice, and the card without hesitation. He turned to Elena and said, "They wanted us to find that," Elena answered. "Then we found it on purpose. The line was half truth and half defiance. The knock at the door had provided a concrete event to close the chapter on. An unanswered delivery that proved the night's deception was not finished. Outside the sliding glass, the neon continued to argue with the sky, and inside the suite Alina folded her hands around her clutch and prepared to step into the next move. At the edge of the room, Gabriel placed the dice into his palm and set his thumb on the clipped corner of the card. Alina watched him, and in that watch she chose a strategy rather than a feeling. Expose the planted messages, find the source of the leak, and force Julian's hand. She pocketed her phone, stood and straightened her shoulders. "We leave in 10 minutes, she said, precise and small. Gabriel nodded and closed his hand around the dice as if the small cubes were both a threat and a talisman. The night had cost them a staged kiss and given them a clue. Alina took a breath, tasted cigarette smoke and jasmine in Gabriel's coat, and stepped toward the balcony where the city alarms were soft and human voices were thinning. The door closed behind her with the echo of someone watching and a pair of dice waiting on the threshold. Alina shoved the terrace door with both palms and rain hit her face like an accusation. Below, a ring of phones and flashbulbs stared up at her. Shame tightened her shoulders, shame that started on the dais and followed her through the ballroom. And it moved her feet toward the railing even as the hotel manager called her name. "Mies. Pierce, please." Marta over the rain, voice pitched to keep her from stepping over the edge of a public spectacle. Alina heard the syllables of her own failure in every shudder. The central problem was clear in the first breath. She was trapped between a live accusation and a crowd that would not stop until it had a story to sell. Shame pushed her away from the railing and into the suite door instead of out into the night, and that feeling shaped every step she forced herself to take. She had not planned to be cornered on the terrace. Only minutes earlier the days had erupted. Someone had demanded an explanation for an engagement rumor, and the cameras had loved the moment. Now the strip was a slurry of neon and umbrellas, and the hotel manager, Marta, stood with an umbrella and a frown, blocking the stairwell. Alina's hands shook as she tugged the silk shawl tighter around her shoulders. She moved like a woman who had practiced composure for years and kept failing at the one public test that mattered. The suite door slammed behind her and Gabriel was there, turning from the minibar with his jacket half off. He did not smile. He did not look surprised. He closed the door in one precise motion, and the click of the lock sounded like a verdict. "Don't go out there, Gabriel." His voice was low and measured. "Jonas won't let you leave." Alina met his eyes and felt anger flare through the shame. Anger that someone could put cameras on her like she belonged to the room. "Gabriel," she said, each consonant hard, "I am leaving." "I need to get to my car." His mouth tightened. "You won't make it to the car without a headline." Her anger landed as a short, solid shove. It kept her upright in the rain and carried her to the argument she did not want. They argued in short sentences across the living room. "You could help, Elena. You de-lock the door." "I locked it," Gabriel answered. "They won't leave the plaza. They won't stop for the hotel rules." Elena paced. She jabbed a fingertip at the glass coffee table. "I don't owe them a scene." "I don't owe them anything." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "You do once you step into a storm like this." Marta hovered by the door, hands folded over a notepad. She, Miss Pierce, Mr. Hart, the hotel's liability, and Elena cut her off. The exchange was a negotiation. Nothing stayed abstract. Each line named a danger. The cameras, the dossier rumor, the people with microphones. The problem had weight. A dossier threatened to go public unless they staged a convincing couple performance for the cameras. Gabriel's associate, Marco, called with a thin apology and a demand. He had told Gabriel what would happen if the press saw Alina storming away alone. Gabriel had paused, then told Alina the choice. Play the story convincingly for the night and buy time, or risk whatever file Marco promised would devastate both of them. Elena's shame shifted into a cold, practical anger. She straightened. "What are the terms?" she asked. Her voice was steady. Name it. That question moved them into the cramped, pragmatic negotiation they both pretended they wanted to avoid. They sat at the dining alcove and named the terms in clipped sentences. Alina set a glass down hard enough that water sloshed over the rim. "I will smile. I will kiss for the cameras if you make sure that dossier doesn't see print tonight," she said. Her words were contracts, not promises. Gabriel listed conditions with the same economy. He spoke of times, public positions, the color of her dress for exit shots. Marco's voice came in flat from Gabriel's phone. "Convince them you read together at midnight, or you get the leak." Elena named her need first, dignity, a safe way out. Gabriel named his, control of the narrative. Both bargaining positions hid a private worry. Elena worried that the staged intimacy would humiliate her more than the dossier ever could. Gabriel worried whether the act would unbalance something he had kept rigid for years. Footsteps and raised voices at the foyer pulled their attention. Jonas had not gone away. A crew surged against the door and Marta put her hand flat on the wood, then stepped forward to argue with them. "You can barge in," she said. "This is private property." Jonas laughed, a high sound in the suite hall. "Private until she gives us a picture," he said, voice carrying like a thrown stone. Gabriel moved between Alina and the door as he had in the suite before. The physical placement meant everything. He planted his feet and faced the press with his hands unclenched. "Leave now," he said. "You're causing a scene." Jonas pushed and another camera clicked. Gabriel Hart. "Care to comment on ms?" Pierce exit. Elena pulled the shawl tighter and felt relief and panic strangle each other. The danger changed from distant to immediate. The paparazzi were not just observers, they were an active force that could topple choices. In the commotion, Alina's hand brushed Gabriel's discarded jacket on the back of a chair. She felt the fabric, then the stitched pocket where a folded paper bulged. For a second she pretended it was nothing. Then she slid her fingers into the pocket and drew out a small file with her name written across the cover. The room went thin around her. She held the paper with the same careful hands she used to fold napkins at charity events as a child, and the paper felt heavier than concrete. "Gabriel," she said. And the name came out like a question. He watched her without flinching. "You have a file on me." Her voice had a notch of accusation and a tilt of fear. Gabriel moved closer. He did not take the file from her. He let her hold it. "I have a file on anyone who walks into public friction with me," he said. "I prepare for fallout." His words landed like an explanation and a confirmation at once. Alina's shame split into suspicion. She thought of the days of the woman who had jabbed a finger at her. She thought of the sequence. Accusation, flashing lights, the door slammed behind her. Was Gabriel protecting her because he cared, or because he had foresight that could also serve him? "Why me?" she asked. "Why prepare for my ruin?" Gabriel's face did not shift to softness. "Because you were there. Because people want a story." The answer sounded like practical truth. Elena folded the file and shoved it toward the table. The discovery rewired the room. It changed who had power and who was being protected. Their negotiation resumed but went sharper. Elena's voice was a quick blade now. "If tonight is a show, I decide the script," she said. Gabriel's mouth thinned. "You will follow my lead while we re in public," he said. "I will position you, and you will do what we agreed." Marta watched both of them. "I need to emphasize hotel policy," she said. "You two together are better than you two apart." Jonas muttered from the foyer. "We want the kiss," he called. Elena forced a laugh the size of a wince. "We can give you the kiss," she said. Her body sagged into compromise. Shame softened into a tactical calm. They rehearsed exits twice in the living room. Elena practiced resting her head on Gabriel's shoulder, then looked up as if faint regret might be visible. Gabriel practiced the scripted laugh and the placement of a hand at the small of her back. They moved in precise, staged increments and felt the odd friction of pretend touch. Each rehearsal was a small, concrete action. A hand on a waist, a breath close to an ear. That's too light. Elena, during the second run, you look distant. Gabriel adjusted his posture. Look affectionate, not needy. He said, we control it. We don't become it. The rehearsals were short sentences of motion and correction, and the act of practicing did not let either of them forget the stakes. Marta knocked gently on the door and then returned to the foyer to keep Jonas at bay. She brought a tray with 2 glasses. You'll need something to steady you, she said. Elena took a glass, then set it down untouched. The arrival of a hotel staff member and a silver tray interrupted the private calculus with a small human detail. Marta had been in both earlier beats. She was now a practical actor whose presence changed their options. You should choose a single item to decide what happens after midnight. It keeps things orderly. Elena looked at Gabriel. A single item, she asked. Gabriel's eyes flicked to the coffee table. He picked up a small pair of decorative dice from a hotel casino gift and rolled them between his fingers, then set them in front of Elena. We agreed on a token before, he said, dice or ring. Tonight, dice. Elena felt the object like a cold weight in her palm. It was specific. It was a physical hinge for an emotional decision. The press at the door swelled like a body of water against a dam. Jonas shouted that someone had a live feed and the hotel manager shouted back. Gabriel stepped into the foyer when the crew pushed harder and placed himself between the door and Elena. A photographer lunged. Marta put an arm out to stop him. Gabriel's chest pressed against the doorframe. Elena watched his back as if she had never seen that posture before. She felt the impulse to run and to hold. The 2 impulses collided. Gabriel, she said, and the single syllable carried a lot of things. Thanks, accusation, wonder. He turned his head fractionally and said, stay with me through the exit. His words were not a promise of more than the night, but they were an offer of a shield. When the breach failed and the crew paused, Marco's voice came in again. Low and dangerous, do it convincingly, he said. Make them believe you belong together tonight. A sloppy act and the dossier gets out. Elena's stomach tightened. Fear entered under the skin. The staccato fear made her mouth dry and her hands slow. She felt a second emotion shift. From anger and calculated calm to fear that they had misread how coordinated the threat was. We don't need to perform for them forever. Gabriel. One solid scene, and we cut through the noise. Elena wanted to believe him, and also wanted to test him. In the living room she found a note tucked under the couch cushion, a hurried line in a handwriting she recognized from past charity invoices. A name and a warning. It simply. Don't trust the angle they show. The note was a remnant of an earlier scramble in her life, when a manager had taught her to read the cut of a photograph and protect her face. The paper put another layer on the dossier threat. Someone had prepared for multiple cameras, multiple cuts, edited narratives. Elena's doubt shifted into a sharper suspicion. She looked at Gabriel. Did you plant this on me? She asked. He made a small sound that might have been a laugh. No. I would be more careful with planting, he said. This came from outside. The discovery changed the timeline of who had moved against her first. They left the suit in stage steps. Gabriel adjusted his tux. Elena smoothed her silk and fastened the vintage cocktail ring at her finger. Cameras flared as they moved from the private corridor into the hotel's public atrium. Gabriel kept his hand at the small of her back, an unbroken line of posture that told the press a consistent story. A single kiss was given under a flood of flashes, precise and brief. Gabriel, Elena later, voice small in the service elevator. Was that real for you at all? He let the elevator doors close on their mirrored faces. It was a necessary performance, he replied, and yet I noticed how your laugh changed. That observation landed harder than a claim of feeling. It was a small human map of something shifting. Back in the suite, the dossier remained an immediate threat, and the night had altered both of them in ways that mattered. Elena took the dice from the coffee table and rolled them once in her palm. The metal tapped her thumb with a staccato sound. She thought of the days, of the woman who had jabbed a finger at her, and of the cameras that had sharpened that shame into a weapon. "What do you want from me outside of this?" she asked, naming the practical limit of the night. Gabriel met her gaze evenly. "I want you to be safe," he said. "Safe enough to walk out of a room without being torn apart." His phrasing was careful. He did not say what, if anything, lay beyond protection. Jonas leaked an edited clip that hurt them both. The newsroom that fed off scandal framed the kiss as proof of a secret liaison, and the dossier story gained traction. Alina felt the old shame return with a new sting. She had helped shape a story that now painted her as a conspirator. She slammed a fist into a cushion and kept silent for a count of 10. Gabriel was quiet beside her. Marta called from the door with updates about which feeds had picked up the false narrative. "They'll keep running with anything they can attach to your name," she said. Alina forced herself to breathe, to name each thing she could control. She decided, in a sequence of short actions, to go to Marco's number and demand to know who threatened them. Marco's voice on the line was brittle. He denied some involvement, deflected others. "You chose this stage," he said to Gabriel. "You for control, and control requires sacrifice." Alina cut in. "Who put the file in his jacket?" she demanded, cold now. Marco hesitated and then said, "You have enemies who profit off your fall." The answer was evasive, but it pointed to a concrete fact. A third party had an interest in destabilizing them both. The twist changed the story's angle. It made their staged act no longer only a private choice, but a piece in a wider game. The climax arrived as thunder and a phone call layered on one another. A new live feed claimed that the dossier contained a financial irregularity tied to Alina's family foundation. Elevator music in the background of the feed was cut off by reporters shouting that Alina was hiding debts. Jonas' voice was loud in the background. Gabriel's phone rang with Marco's name, and he answered on speaker. "Marco, a single sentence. They were going to publish in 45 minutes unless you admit guilt." Elena felt the room compress. She pressed her palms into her eyes and then opened them with a decision forming inside. Her shame became a tool. Her anger sharpened into a choice. She moved to the rain-streaked window and faced the neon strip below as if it could be argued with. "Marco," she said into Gabriel's phone, voice steady, "then publish. We will own the narrative for what it is, and we will show the facts that matter." Marco laughed once, a cold sound. "You will ruin yourself," he said. "You both will." Alina's palms were steady. "Then tell that to the cameras," she answered. The confrontation forced everyone to name what they feared: exposure, control, and the cost of truth. Afterward, the storm eased. Alina walked down the carpeted corridor with the dice cupped in her hand. Gabriel followed but stopped at the last turn. He reached out, fingers hovering near her shoulder, then drew back. Marta watched from the suit doorway with an expression that was both sympathetic and professional. Elena kept walking. She did not run. She did not slam doors. She took concrete steps and kept the dice between thumb and index finger. At the corridor's end she paused, thumb rolling the metal faces once more, then slid the dice into the pocket of her clutch. The chapter closed on that simple motion. She had negotiated the night, named limits, and chosen a physical token that could bind or free them. The dossier's immediate publication was stopped for now by the tangled choices they had made, but the room of cameras still hummed beyond the glass. Elena stepped into the hotel's quieter hallway, hand on the clutch, and the dice were a cold weight against her palm as she decided whether to open the door behind her or keep walking. She turned the handle and walked away, leaving Gabriel standing near the rain-streaked window with his jaw set, and the dice in her pocket decided what would happen next.